What if the letters of love we never sent hold the key not just to our past, but also to the new beginnings we desperately seek? Welcome to Happiness of Love, your daily dose of K-dramas. Get ready to fall in love with unforgettable stories. Can you tell us where are you listening from? Naomi Fujimoto felt a rush of emotion as she turned the key in the lock of her new apartment, the metallic click echoing a promise of fresh beginnings, even as shadows of her past clung tightly to her resolve. The memories of Ryan, her charming but distant ex-fiancé, flashed unbidden in her mind, leaving a bitter aftertaste in her mouth. Their happy moments were now tainted by the abrupt end of a love that had felt so certain. Here, in this small yet characterful space, with its wooden floors that creaked underfoot and vintage wallpaper peeling slightly at the edges, she hoped to find solace and perhaps even the courage to love again. As she began to unpack her life into this charming but outdated locale, she felt both excitement and a nagging uncertainty about the next chapter that awaited her. As her hands rummaged through boxes filled with books and trinkets, something caught her attention: a small stack of letters wedged behind an old kitchen cabinet, their envelopes yellowed with age and dust. Curiosity ignited within her, compelling her to retrieve the forgotten items. Each envelope bore the name Kenji Tanaka addressed in elegant script. The letters had clearly been cherished, holding secrets of the heart within them. Without thought, she let out a soft gasp, her breath hitching as she began to thumb through the pages. They spoke of longing, wistfully laced with regrets and deeply personal memories that resonated with her own struggles. One phrase struck her with particular intensity: "If time were kinder, perhaps we would have had another ending." The words hung palpably in the air, enveloping her, reminding her of the fragility of love and the scars left in its wake. The apartment, once filled with only the sound of her solitude, now thrummed with the weight of these echoes of another life. Naomi felt an insatiable desire to know more. Who was this Kenji? Why had he left these letters behind? Her heart raced as she thought of exploring the history wrapped within these pages, and she quickly set out to inquire with her landlord. When she learned that Kenji had lived there for years before disappearing 6 months prior, a spark of determination was ignited in her. The letters deserved an ending, and she was ready to uncover the story that had been etched into their paragraphs. With each step she took toward discovering Kenji Tanaka, she felt as though she were peeling back the layers of her own heart. Caught between her own bittersweet memories and the promise of what these letters could reveal, Naomi felt as if she were stepping onto a stage, the lights of her life shifting to illuminate a story much larger than she had anticipated. She didn't know it yet, but in her quest to find Kenji and return these fragments of his past, she was unwittingly preparing herself to confront her own fears about love, loss, and the possibilities that awaited just beyond the horizon. Naomi's search for Kenji led her down a winding alleyway in the heart of San Francisco, where she finally arrived at a small antique restoration shop nestled between a vintage bookstore and a quaint cafe. The exterior of the shop bore the marks of age, an inviting but faded sign hanging above the door simply reading Tanaka Restorations. With each step she took towards the entrance, the scent of old wood mixed with varnish wafted through the cracked window panes, making the air rich with nostalgia. As she pushed open the door, the small bell chimed softly, echoing through the dimly lit space, illuminating carefully arranged pieces of furniture, each carrying its own story, layered in dust and time. Kenji was there, hunched over a wooden frame, an oblivious artisan absorbed in his craft. His brow furrowed in concentration, and Naomi couldn't help but admire the meticulous care with which he worked, every detail a testament to his dedication despite the chaos of his own life that lingered just beneath the surface. He barely acknowledged her presence when she stepped in, his focus unwavering as the tools he handled became an extension of himself. As Naomi cleared her throat, gathering her thoughts, she felt a strange excitement mixed with apprehension. She had to muster the courage to mention the letters, simple words that felt like the lingering perfume of lost passion. When she finally spoke, telling him about the letters she found, she watched as his entire demeanor shifted, the warmth of the shop seemingly fading. His hands tightened around the wooden frame as if it was the only thing anchoring him to reality, a flicker of pain flashing across his otherwise stoic face. The transformation was subtle but evident, a crack in the fortress he had built around himself. He responded curtly, barely letting her finish her sentence, saying that they were something that no longer matters. Naomi's heart sank. The coldness of his refusal felt like a chilling gust of wind on an otherwise sunny day. Fueled by frustration and a sense of justice for the heartfelt words meant for someone else, she insisted, her own voice trembling slightly, that words written with such emotion shouldn't be discarded so easily. She believed they held value, a history that demanded to be honored. But instead of finding common ground, she felt him retreat further into his shell, where her earnestness seemed to bounce off the wall of his indifference. When he simply told her to throw them away and turned his back, a wave of disappointment washed over her. As she stepped out onto the street, the bustle of San Francisco surrounding her, she couldn't shake the feeling that Kenji was hiding something, an untold story lurking behind those stormy eyes of his, waiting for someone to call it out. That night, when she returned to her apartment, she sat on her bed, the letters laid out delicately before her like old secrets begging to be shared. With each word she read again, she felt the weight of longing and heartbreak that cast a shadow across Kenji's life, as if through the ink she could glimpse the emotions he buried so deeply. The delicate strokes of the handwriting spoke to her in a language she understood too well, a yearning for closure, a wish for reconciliation that resonated deeply in her own heart. She found herself drawn deeper into the beautiful melancholy of those letters, feeling her own feelings of love and loss stirring within her, compelling her to search for the truth behind the silence that had enveloped Kenji Tanaka. Naomi knew she had to see Kenji again, driven by a blend of curiosity and a profound desire to help him confront his ghosts. She returned to his shop, the familiar aroma of varnish mixed with aged wood greeting her like an old friend as she stepped inside. The place was a sanctuary of sorts, with every corner filled with the stories of forgotten furniture waiting to be restored, much like the man who tended to them. Yet, Kenji's demeanor remained frosty, his focus unwavering as he meticulously worked on an old wooden chair, the sound of his tools echoing in the otherwise quiet space. Naomi approached him with a smile, mentioning the possibility of commissioning a restoration, trying to bridge the chasm between them. He nodded briefly, his attention still fixed on the wood, barely granting her the courtesy of eye contact. Each question she posed was met with terse replies, leaving her feeling invisible, a mere shadow in his sanctum of solitude. Yet in those fleeting moments, she glimpsed something deeper, a flicker of sadness in his eyes, a hesitation when they spoke of time, and a softness that emerged whenever she talked about literature and poetry, subjects that seemed to ignite a spark of connection within him, if only for a heartbeat. It was during one of these instances, while the sun dipped low and cast warm golden hues through the dusty windows, that Naomi decided to take a leap of faith. She carefully unsealed one of the letters she had found, its paper fragile with age, and placed it silently on his work table. Without saying a word, she turned to leave, her heart racing with uncertainty. That night, under the dim glow of her apartment light, she glanced down at the empty space beside her, feeling a weight within her heart. Back in his shop, Kenji was enveloped in a cocoon of memories stirred by the letter that lay on his table, its familiar cursive intertwining with forgotten echoes of laughter and heartbreak. The emotions that rushed over him were unpredictable and raw, sending him spiraling back to moments shared with Emi Watanabe, those late-night talks laced with dreams, the comfort of her warm presence beside him, and even the painful goodbyes that had stitched his heart into a tapestry of longing. With trembling fingers, he picked up the letter, the delicate paper almost crumbling beneath his touch, and the words ignited a storm of feelings he had buried in the depths of his soul. The mention of moments lost within the lines felt like a cruel reminder of his choices, and the truth hit him hard. He had spent years wandering through life, haunted by what could have been, constructing walls to keep out the regrets that loomed like shadows. As he read each meticulously penned phrase, a wave of nostalgia washed over him, and a particular memory surfaced, the way Emmy used to trace invisible letters on the palm of his hand, filling his heart with warmth that felt both alien and achingly familiar all at once. He clutched the letter tightly, the ink smudging slightly against his perspiring palm, but instead of the relief he had hoped for, what consumed him was an overwhelming sense of loss, forcing him to confront the depths of his sorrow, the kind of sorrow that rooted itself deep within the heart and, despite all efforts to repress it, stubbornly refused to fade away. The next morning, Naomi was still wrapped in the soft cocoon of her quilt, dappled sunlight filtering through the sheer curtains, casting playful shadows across her bedroom when she heard a soft knock on her door. She opened it to find Kenji standing there, looking somewhat disheveled yet strikingly intense, the letter from the previous night clutched tightly in his hand as if it were a lifeline. He stood at her threshold, an unfamiliar vulnerability flickering in his gaze, and he asked her why she insisted on getting involved in something that wasn't hers to fix, his voice a steady murmur that contrasted with the storm brewing beneath his calm exterior. Naomi felt a rush of surprise at his sudden appearance, the warmth of her morning routine disrupted by the depth of his query. She hesitated, her thoughts racing, before she finally admitted that she didn't know, only that she felt like the letters deserved an ending. It was a simple statement but laced with a complexity that echoed her own heart's turmoil. Kenji's expression softened, his strong shoulders visibly tensing as he hesitated to divulge more, finally sharing just a fragment of the truth. Emmy was someone he once loved, but love alone wasn't enough, his words hanging in the air like heavy fog rolling over the bay. Naomi sensed the layers of unspoken grief swirling around him, recognizing that the ache in his voice was not solely about losing Emmy, it was about the choices made, the moments lost, and a life that had certainly veered off course into uncharted territory. They stood there in the hallway, the space between them thick with unvoiced feelings that neither of them fully understood yet. That evening, after the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and violet, Naomi found herself in front of her computer, immersed in a search for more information about Emi Watanabe. Her fingers danced across the keyboard, excitement mixing with apprehension, each click a step deeper into the past that had intertwined itself with her own. As she scrolled through pages filled with accolades and photographs, she discovered that Emi had blossomed into a well-known writer, her graceful prose resonating with readers, and as she found images of Emi's radiant smile contrasting with the melancholic words of the letters, a pang of unease settled in Naomi's heart. She felt conflicted, debating whether to tell Kenji about Emi's life now, yet a voice within her insisted that some things must unfold naturally, allowing the lives of these three individuals to speak for themselves. As Naomi lay awake that night, the dim light of her bedside lamp casting a warm glow in the stillness, she thought about the intertwined destinies sitting so close yet so far apart. With each letter Kenji had read, he was peeling back layers of his own heart, wrestling with the memories he had tucked away in the recesses of his mind. She wondered how much more he could bear to uncover, whether he might find solace or only deeper despair within Emi's words. In the impromptu silence of her thoughts, she recognized that both she and Kenji were entangled in a narrative where love, loss, and longing carved their paths into the very core of their existence. Perhaps, she mused, rather than feeling compelled to interject, she should simply remain a quiet witness and understanding soul who believed that every yearning heart deserved resolution, be it through laughter, tears, or the gentle acknowledgement of what had once been. Days rolled by, and an unhurried rhythm infused Naomi's life. She visited Kenji's shop, exchanging shy smiles and lingering glances, their conversations blossoming amidst threads of laughter and shared silence that carried an unspoken promise. Kenji often caught himself stealing glances at her, trying to memorize the moments they shared, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when deep in thought, or how her laughter danced around them like sunlight filtering through trees. They spoke of mundane things that anchored them in the present, but every now and then, shadows of their pasts flickered just beneath the surface, whispered memories trailing after them like smoke. It was a delicate push and pull, an invisible tether binding their souls, and as Naomi navigated the uncharted waters of their relationship, she felt an intoxicating blend of excitement and trepidation stirring within. But every time her gaze lingered on Kenji, she noticed an underlying sadness there, an imprint left by the weight of unfulfilled dreams. One rainy afternoon, as droplets tapped against the window panes like whispered confessions, Naomi found herself staring out into the gray streets, contemplating the fragility of human connections. Kenji walked in, his presence pulling her from her introspective reverie. His eyes, usually guarded, seemed softer today, as if the clouds outside had somehow mirrored the turmoil brewing within. As he wandered closer, she knew that whatever storm was raging inside him would eventually come to light, whether through the letters or the unspoken truths that danced in the air around them. And in that moment, she realized that she wasn't just helping Kenji find closure, the tangled feelings binding them were preparing to reveal a different story altogether, one that had yet to be written. As the days passed, the air outside Naomi's apartment crisped slightly with the onset of autumn, the city she had come to love turning shades of gold and rust, mirroring the slow unraveling of her own heart. Naomi found herself visiting Kenji's shop more frequently, drawn not only by the allure of his craft but by the tentative connection that had begun to bloom between them. In the quiet moments spent amidst the scent of varnish and old wood, she noted the way Kenji's fingers glided over the furniture he restored, as if caressing memories he wished to bring back to life. Even as he remained mostly reserved, she could sense beneath the surface a curiosity about her own life, and this prompted him to ask questions that made her pause. He inquired about her failed engagement to Ryan, the man whose shadows had once loomed large over her heart. With each shared detail, Naomi uncovered layers within herself, weaving together her past into a tapestry rich with experience, pain, and the remnants of hope. As she recounted stories of her estranged father, Haruto, a man she had always yearned to understand, she felt the warmth of Kenji's quiet understanding, as if they were two kindred spirits sharing their most intimate flaws in the safety of the dimly lit room. One evening, while the sky outside transformed into a canvas of twilight hues, she decided to leave him another letter, her breath catching slightly as she placed it on his work table. The faint aroma of pine and cedar hung in the air as she inscribed a note of her own: "You don't have to read them all at once. But if you do, maybe you'll find something you weren't expecting." In leaving the letter, it was both a test and an invitation, a bridge she hoped would lead Kenji closer to the healing she sensed he desperately needed. Days unfolded like petals of a flower in the sun, and at last, Kenji found the courage to revisit the emotions captured in Emi's letters, poring over each written word as if unearthing a buried treasure. With every letter he read, memories surged forward like waves crashing against the shore of his consciousness, memories of laughter, of sweet whispers exchanged in secret, and of a love that had quietly haunted him, maintaining a fragile hold on his heart. He felt the words resonate deeply, stirring emotions he had tucked away for so long, and yet in the quiet corners of his mind, another realization took hold. Leafing through the neatly penned notes, it dawned on him that Emmy had never intended these letters to reach him. Each line was a catharsis, a farewell wrapped in tenderness. They were meant not to solicit a response but to provide her own sense of closure and echo of a past love that could never find resolution. The truth felt heavy in his chest, an amalgamation of nostalgia and acceptance. As the sun set and painted the room in shades of pink and violet, he wrestled with the bittersweet sting of that realization, torn between the memories that held him captive and the burgeoning respect he was gaining for Emmy's journey, a journey where he himself had once been a pivotal character but now stood as an observer. As Kenji sat alone in his cluttered workshop, surrounded by the scent of varnish and aged wood, the letters consumed his thoughts. Each delicate stroke of Emmy's handwriting unfurled memories that wrapped tightly around his heart, leaving him breathless with both nostalgia and sorrow. The words spoke of a love that flourished and withered, lingering like a fragrant echo in the air, yet each reading illuminated the painful truth that he was lost in a past that no longer existed. He found himself lost in Emmy's lines about a heart that never fully unfurled, words that seemed to cry out for validation, for acknowledgement of their existence. With every sleepless night, he read and reread the letters seeking permission to move on, grasping for a shattering moment of clarity that eluded him, a sign that the love he lost might still be real, or at least significant. But the more he unraveled the threads of those sentiments, the shrouded memories only tightened their grip on his heart, turning into chains that held him captive within a fortress of regret. In this deepening solitude, Kenji found himself avoiding Naomi. The late afternoons bled into nights as he worked on furniture that held stories of their own, crafting them into something beautiful while refusing to acknowledge the beautiful potential brewing with Naomi. As he immersed himself in the comforts of the workshop, the warmth of human connection faded, much like the daylight outside his dusty bay window. His fingers lost their steadiness with each unanswered text from her, the vibrancy of her voice turning to silence as their bond began to fray. Naomi felt the change, sensed the walls rising around him, believed they had been making progress only to find herself stepping back into uncertainty. He had been a lighthouse guiding her through the tumultuous waves of heartbreak, and now, with each retreat, she felt like a ship lost at sea, drifting further away from the shore of hope they had begun to build together. One evening, with frustration bubbling inside her like a boiling pot, Naomi made a decision on impulse, the kind that often leads to new beginnings. She arrived at Kenji's shop, her heart racing against her ribcage, yet the warmth of the lights inside drew her further into the chilly air of dusk. She knocked insistently on the door, a sense of urgency bloomed inside her chest, desperately hoping to pierce through the barrier he had erected. When the door finally creaked open, it revealed Kenji, but something about him felt different. He was a shadow of the man she had grown to know, the exhaustion draping over his features like a heavy cloak. "You were right," he said that night, his voice raw with challenges he hadn't let her in on. "These letters deserve an ending, but maybe that ending was meant for Emmy, not me." Each word poured out with the weight of untold burdens, shadows playing behind his eyes as he searched hers for something, perhaps understanding, perhaps a kindred spirit amid his labyrinth of doubts. He wondered if love was merely a collection of unfinished moments, fragile remnants looping endlessly in time, leaving the question hanging in the air: was closure ever truly possible when echoes of a past love reverberated so fiercely within him? Naomi stood in the dim glow of the workshop, their proximity fraught with unspoken fears that lingered in the spaces between them. "Closure isn't about forgetting," she insisted gently, her heart pulling toward him as she chose her words carefully. "It's about accepting the past as part of who you are and deciding what to do with that experience." There was a delicate harmony in her voice, a soothing balm to Kenji's layered pain, a reminder that while the past could never change, their present still held possibilities. As the tension ebbed slightly, she placed the last letter she had found on his desk, a final gesture of encouragement. It was an invitation to confront the fears that lay beneath the surface. With a heavy heart, she turned to leave, casting one more glance at the man who had swallowed her with intrigue and sorrow, fearing that her departure might mark the end of something precious and unresolved. As she walked away, uncertainty filled the air. She wasn't sure if she would see him again or if he would embrace the paths they could carve out together. The weight of unspoken words hung heavily around them, lingering and waiting to see whether they would rise to meet the dawn or fade into quiet obscurity. Days passed slowly for Naomi, each one blending into the next as she immersed herself in the chaos of her work, attempting to drown out the persistent thoughts of Kenji and the unresolved story that hung between them like a delicate thread. The world outside her apartment faded into the background while the hum of the publishing house filled her ears. It was there, amidst stacks of old manuscripts and the faint scent of ink and paper, that she stumbled upon a collection of poetry submitted by an unfamiliar author, Emi Watanabe. As Naomi's hands trembled with a mix of curiosity and recognition, she flipped through the pages, each one revealing verses that resonated with a haunting familiarity. Her breath caught in her throat when she reached a particular poem, its words speaking of a love that was lost, not due to a lack of sincerity, but because the time had never been right. The imagery conjured a man who dedicated his life to constructing homes for others, yet found himself adrift, never securing one for himself, someone she never stopped thinking about. The realization washed over Naomi like a wave. This was Emi's true final letter, a poignant encapsulation of what she and Kenji once shared, an attempt to immortalize a connection that time had taken away. Without allowing herself a moment more to contemplate, she rushed from the office, her heart pounding with urgency as she clutched the manuscript tightly against her chest, each step propelling her towards Kenji's shop as the words mingled with her own hopes and fears. When she arrived, the sight of his silhouette sitting on the steps, seemingly lost in thought, stirred something deep within her. He appeared distant, his gaze fixed on the ground as though he were searching for something in the cracks of the pavement. Without uttering a single word, she approached and offered him the pages, her heart racing in anticipation of his reaction. The moment their fingers brushed, a spark ignited, and she could sense the weight of all that had transpired between them hanging heavily in the air. Kenji hesitated before accepting the manuscript, an unspoken question lingering in his eyes as he glanced at her, but the moment was fleeting, consumed by the urgency of the words waiting to be uncovered. That night, alone in the quiet solitude of his shop, Kenji opened the pages. With each line he read, he felt memories crashing over him like a stormy sea, dragging him beneath the waves of a past he had tried so desperately to forget. As the words unfolded, so did emotions long buried and neglected. For the first time in years, tears traced their way down his cheeks, carrying with them the weight of his unspoken grief, the longing for a love that had never truly faded. He felt both a profound sadness and an unexpected release, as if unknowingly he had been shackled by his own reluctance to confront the feelings that had lingered like shadows in the corners of his heart. The words cradled him, offering solace and a sense of understanding that had eluded him for so long, and in that moment, he realized that the poetry was not just a reflection of Emi's heart, but a mirror to his own, revealing the intricate tapestry of loss, love, and the possibilities of what could have been. Days turned into a haunting silence in the antique restoration shop, as Kenji remained a ghost of his former self. Naomi worried, the resonance of his absence echoing in the corners of her heart, but she knew that confronting the demons that held him captive was a battle he had to face alone. Each passing day felt like a slow drip of anxiety, punctuated only by the whir of city noises outside her window. Then, one morning, just as the first light slinked through her curtains, she found a small envelope slipped beneath her door, the crisp texture of the paper unfamiliar against her fingers. Inside, a single note from Kenji read, "I need to see her," short yet brimming with uncharted emotions. A cascade of emotions washed over her. Does he seek closure, or is there a flicker of hope for something more? Naomi resolved not to question it, understanding that sometimes, an unasked question held more weight than any answer could provide. Without wasting another moment, she turned her focus to aiding him in this important search. After some diligent digging through event listings, she pinpointed Emi Watanabe's upcoming book signing event slated to unfold in the sun-kissed heart of Los Angeles. Kenji's initial hesitation was palpable. She could see the torment flickering in his eyes, yet he eventually agreed to go, though she could make out the tremor in his hands as they boarded the plane. Sitting beside him in the cramped cabin, she offered her quiet support, the armrest between them serving as both a divide and a connection. The hum of the airplane blended into the chaotic anticipation that filled the air, and Naomi could feel her own heart racing in sync with the unspoken weight of Kenji's unresolved past. When they arrived, the bright Los Angeles sun greeted them, intermingling with an undercurrent of nervous energy as they navigated to the event. The venue was warm, buzzing with chatter and enthusiasm from fans eagerly clutching their copies of Emi's book. Kenji drifted towards the back of the room, his presence almost an afterthought amid the vibrant crowd. There was something fragile about him, as if he was trying to preserve a world where he could still hide from the harshness of reality. He stood there, observing Emi from a distance as she radiated warmth and charisma, reading from her heartfelt poetry. The melodic lilt of her voice pierced through the air, each word imbued with layers of unspoken stories and emotions that only a woman who had lived could convey. As their eyes met for the first time in eons, a shift happened. The atmosphere around them thickened with a concoction of recognition, nostalgia, and an unshakable yearning that had lingered like an uninvited guest. Naomi instinctively stepped away, allowing them the space they needed, her heart a mosaic of conflicting emotions swirling through her as she retreated into the periphery. She couldn't help but glance back occasionally, each look tethered between hope and fear, wondering if perhaps some part of her didn't want Kenji to go back to Emi. She stood rooted in a tense solitude, wishing for a glimpse of the reunion, while grappling with her own unspoken feelings hovering on the edge of her heart. In the backdrop of this poignant moment, the cacophony of the event faded, and for Kenji, this was more than just a chance to reconnect. It was the culmination of years steeped in heartbreak and the fragile stitches of healing waiting to be unwound. As he took a breath, steadying himself for a conversation that had been a lifetime in the making, Naomi found herself caught in a swirl of anticipation and trepidation, wondering what narratives would unfold when love is intersected by the memories of the past. Kenji and Emi sit across from each other in a quiet cafe, nestled between vibrant, colorful flower-filled planters and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee that seemed to charge the air with warmth. The years that had stretched endlessly apart suddenly felt both vast and non-existent, as if they had stepped into a memory rather than reality. Their initial conversation is as delicate as the porcelain cups that cradle their drinks, filled with careful questions and polite smiles that mask the deep well of emotions lingering just beneath the surface. Emi, her fingers nervously tracing the rim of her cup, begins to open up, recalling the shadows of a shared past that still clouded her heart. She admits that she wrote the letters as a way to release the emotions she had kept tucked away, a river of words flowing to bridge the chasm created by their separation. Kenji, his hands wrapped around his own cup, feels each word resonate within him, that longing more tangible now than it had ever been. He listens, watching as her expressive eyes reveal layers of regret and nostalgia, softening the distance that time had carved between them. The conversation moves at a gentle pace, a hesitant dance as they weave through memories, half smiles becoming more frequent, laughter bubbling forth like sunlight breaking through the clouds. However, the air is thick with bittersweet tension, the weight of unspoken truths hanging like a fragile thread threatening to snap with the slightest tug. Eventually, Kenji gathers his courage, the question that has haunted him for years rising to the surface, a specter he has been afraid to confront. He asks her, with a quiet intensity that causes Emi to still her movements, "If I had asked you to stay, would you have?" The question weighs heavily in the air, clinging to the moment, and Emi hesitates, a flicker of pain darting across her face before she responds, the gentle shake of her head accompanied by a sad smile that deepens the depth of their shared sorrow. She says that she would not have, but adds that she would have wanted to, the unfulfilled desire hanging between them like the last leaf clinging to a branch in the fall. In that moment, Kenji realizes that what he has been chasing all this time is not so much Emi herself, but the idea of a life they never got to live together, dreams that faded like shadows at dusk. As they sit there, feeling the gravity of the past entwined with the present, the connection between them shifts, no longer rooted in what could have been but rather in a profound understanding of their individual journeys. When they finally part ways, the cafe transforming into a backdrop of muted chatter and laughter, there are no dramatic declarations, no rekindled romance, but a silent acknowledgement that they were undeniably significant to each other. The exchange leaves them altered, a delicate, unspoken pact lingering, allowing them to recognize that even if their story was never meant to be a forever one, it had shaped them in ways they could only begin to comprehend. They walk away from each other, not with hearts brimming with finality but with gratefulness for the moments they spent together, the threads of their lives woven into a more textured tapestry, and understanding that sometimes, closure is found not in a definitive ending but in the acceptance of an ongoing narrative that continues to evolve with time. In the following weeks, the days fold into one another like the pages of a cherished book, each moment shared between Kenji and Naomi layered with a beautiful complexity. They walk together beneath the glimmer of streetlights, their conversations flowing freely, touching on dreams they had tucked away, hopes they dared to whisper aloud. Each time Naomi steps into the shop, it feels less like a visit and more like a homecoming. Kenji's laughter, once rare, now punctuates the air, a sweet melody that draws her closer. The lingering sorrow of his past begins to dissipate, giving way to a new warmth that both terrifies and exhilarates them. One late afternoon, as golden sunlight spills through the shop's window, illuminating the dust motes that dance in the air, Kenji reveals a secret he'd kept buried. He asks Naomi to help him restore an antique writing desk, a family heirloom that had once belonged to his father. As they work together, they share stories. Naomi speaks of her own distant relationship with her father, while Kenji reveals the dreams he once had of becoming an architect, how he lost his passion in the wake of heartache. They are both piecing together their lives, just as they are now piecing together this desk, each stroke of polish and hammer of nails binding them closer. But as if fate were watching from the shadows, an unexpected turn arrives. Just as they begin to contemplate the beauty of new beginnings, a letter slips beneath the door of the shop, one that bears Kenji's name, but is unmarked. With hesitant hands, he opens it, his heart pounding in his chest. The words spill out like fragile treasures, revealing that Emi has published a collection of poems inspired by their time together, a stunningly intimate ode to lost love and fleeting moments. The news ignites something within him, a tumultuous swirl of emotions, the line between the past and present blurring violently. Later that evening, under the nighttime sky, Kenji stands at the edge of the bay, the city lights twinkling like stars fallen to earth, the voice of his heart whispering that he must confront what has been haunting him. Naomi senses his tension and approaches him, the air thick with unspoken words. Kenji takes a deep breath, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that sends shivers down her spine. He confesses that he feels the weight of Emi's words heavy on his shoulders, yet he also knows that his journey with Naomi has become equally significant. He ponders aloud if he can truly embrace a future where he writes a new story, one that isn't just about love lost but love that is being forged anew. In that moment, a decision crystallizes in his mind, one that promises to change everything. He wants to agree to meet Emi, not to reignite the flickering flame of their past, but as an act of finality and acknowledgement that some stories must find closure to allow for others to begin. The sheer thought of it brings anxiety, but he realizes he can't live in the shadows of what could have been any longer. Placing a gentle hand on Naomi's shoulder, he promises that regardless of what happens, she is the one he wants to explore new beginnings with. As they stand side by side, contemplating the new journeys ahead, the faint sound of laughter echoes down the waterfront, catching their attention. They turn to find a group of children playing nearby, their innocent giggles blending with the gentle waves. In that moment, Naomi feels a surge of hope wash over her. Perhaps life is not merely a collection of unfinished moments, but a series of beautiful, tangled stories, waiting to unfold in ways they had never imagined. Emboldened by mutual understanding, they take their first step into an unknown future together, the warmth of their connection enveloping them like a soft embrace. As they disappear into the night, laughter trailing behind them, the world feels ripe with possibilities, each heartbeat echoing the promise that tomorrow might just unfold another chapter in the astonishing tale of love, loss, and the ever-elusive hope that always lingers on the horizon. The doors to their hearts remain wide open, inviting the reader to wonder how far this journey will take them, how many more letters and stories are yet to be written, creating an exhilarating anticipation for what comes next. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe to Happiness of Love. That way, you won't miss any of our heartfelt romances. See you in the next love story.